Welcome back, generals. I thought I make a video, not a let's fix. Let's do a let's look, let's look at things video. There's one topic that is something that is coming up every year, every now and then, and it's always controversial topic, and that's about touching the game in controversial ways, which causes controversial discussions, and it's always up for debate, right? If you approach things in controversial ways, controversial topics, like for example, exploits, bug fixes, right? Bug fixes and exploit fixes can be controversial depending on whether players think it should be fixed or not fixed, right? Things like this. And it always causes friction because there will be one side or one camp of players that like things to be touched and other players don't like it to be touched. And some players take issue with this kind of design and other players take issues with another kind of design or don't take an issue with the design, right? And so it's always a topic for debate, right? And so the direction that we in the Superhackers organization take is that we will be focusing on fixing up the game in all areas. Try to fix it up as good as we can. That doesn't necessarily mean that products that derive from our work will benefit from all the various fixes, but they will be able to opt in these kind of fixes, right? So basically, if we have like the Superhackers, I put it like, let's write here super. Yeah. So the work of the Superhackers, like we have like the code repository, right? And then we have some data repository, right? So there will be data and code, and this will improve the game, right? And then from this, basically, other projects can emerge, right? So then other projects derive, like for example, Generals Online, right? Is then a project. Let's call it here online, right? So that already builds on top of our work, right? And then that builds up, and there's already some other project, like I don't know for what mod it is, but the fork is called game code modding, right? So there will be other projects that derive from it and work on top of it, and they will do their own spin-offs, right, and own fixes, and try to advance for different kind of projects, right? And obviously this can also happen that other work can go to super, right? So like for example, I think across projects, like so for example, you can have online go also. No, that's the wrong color. So you can have like online, for example, also go into modding, right? Or online go into here, right? Or you can also have modding go back into here, certain changes, right? So it's like an ecosystem where things will build on top of each other or borrow things like this, right? But basically, in our organization, we don't want to put a hold on anything just because someone thinks that this should not be touched, right? So if there's an exploit like scutbug, for example, and some players think that scutbug should not be fixed, we will fix it regardless and make it possible to use that fix, right? Then someone else can go ahead and they can disable the fix if they like. Now, in case of scutbug, is very unlikely. It's probably not the best example, but it's an easy to understand example, right? So if someone really wanted to use a scutbug, they could, just spin their own thing and then do that, right? So from our perspective, it's just like, just fix everything, make the game as good as possible, and that's about it, right? So it's pretty simple. It's pretty clean, right? And then like you will have a publisher like let's put here some color, this one. So publisher, community outpost, right? Outpost, right? And they might then take the work that we prepare for them, and maybe they cherry pick, make some adjustments, maybe they request them, or maybe they put them themselves, and then they can act as a publisher, and then they can release a product to the customer, right? Here are the people down here, yeah, the players, yeah, and happy players have their arms up, right? And then they can use the product and interact, and then they can talk back, and make their requests here and their feedbacks, right? And then community outposts, can then talk back to here and say what they want, right? And so there can be like a stream of information, right? The problem is in these social interactions, and it happens all the time, is so typically, like if you look at projects from if you a regular game development, right? So you have a game studio that develops a game. You will have developers in the organization, right? Here the red organization, yeah, that will be the developers, and then they will talk to managers and the general manager and producers who manage the efforts, and then there will be some community representatives who talk with the community members, right? So developers don't mostly, I would say in the vast majority of cases, they don't interact with the player base. There will be people who listen into the community and will gather the feedback, and then the developers will get to work, right? So for example, if EA would now make a patch for the game, then they would work at EA and make the changes to the game, and they would potentially listen for some ideas here and there, but for most of the time they would work and try to implement the things that they think that make sense, and then at some point they will send it to QA, and QA will test it, and then when it's all stable and all working well, and they think the designs are good, the changes are good, they all make sense, then they will release it, and then the players can download it, and then they play it. And then it decides whether the players like the changes or not. Maybe they like some of the changes, maybe they don't like other changes, right? So it could be a hit and miss, depending on what EA does, right? But the developers, they don't directly interact with the developers for the most part. Now, this is for the conventional studios, right? If you look at indie games, it could be different. The indie developer, small team, or just a single person, it could be more intimate than a classic game studio, right? So that's a different story. So for us, we are more like indie developers, right? We are not like a studio. But the problem is that the exposure that we have to the community is so vast, and there's so much potential for upset with players and with developers, that it's impossible to manage for developers to engage with this reasonably well. Like there can be a lot of pressures, like players can make a lot of requests, they can make good requests, they can make unreasonable requests, they can start to harass, they can, shoot up 100 messages to a developer, be annoying, or be helpful. They can test and, give good feedback and be available whenever you need tests. So they could be act like a QA guy and just test and give feedbacks on developments, or they could give feedbacks on designs, right? To say whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, or it needs to be tweaked in some way, right? So there can be feedbacks which are positive, but there can also be feedbacks which are negative. If they will start to nag and insult and shame and, just make the life hard for the developers to focus on their work, right? And unfortunately, this is what happens quite a lot, especially when working on things that A, are controversial, and B, which are not worked in the time of pacing that the people expect it to be worked on. So there's two problems. When the developers are slower than what the players expect, and if they touch things that they expect to not be touched, like changing some design, right? So there could be something small, like change the vision range of a unit, or it could be big things like fixing some exploit that could be quite critical, right? So players could be upset about the various things, and since there are so many players, there's so many possibilities that someone can be happy or not happy about any particular change, and it will be impossible to make all players equally happy. Now, what you can do is you can be super conservative and not touch anything that is controversial, or you can be a bit more flexible and maybe touch some of the controversial things, or you can be more open and touch more controversial things, or you can be super flexible and touch a lot of controversial things and shape it into a completely new direction. This is typically what the modding teams do, right? When like the Shockwave and Rise of the Reds and things like this, right? They go like new games and new experiences with totally new units and stuff like this, which is very far, but this is typically what players also expect from a mod, right? That it's changing a lot of things. In multiplayer community, it's not really clear what most players expect, because there are voices of players who want to have this change and others who say not to change certain things, right? So players probably agree that it should still be it should retain the original experience and the original design, but the degrees to which this can happen can vary a lot, right? So it's not really clear like what is the actual factual best setup. It's something that needs to be figured out over time as you like investigate things and test things and study how the things work and try to figure out like how can this be improved, how can this be better, what is broken, what is not broken, right? And in my perspective, the way I see it, the game is far from perfect. Technically, it's a disaster, but also fundamentally design-wise, there are a lot of bad quirks that make that really cater to a bad experience. Like overall, the gameplay is fine, right? You have a lot of factions, you have a lot of variety. Now, the 0 Hour specifically was a super crunch game, so it was rushed out in very few months, right? So there was not much time to polish a lot of things, and a lot of bugs are in there, a lot of cut content as well, right? Which is evident in like the voice files. You look into the voice files and see that there are unit voices for units that never made it into 0 Hour. So a lot of things were cut, a lot of it is undone, a lot of the setups are not correctly set up because there are mistakes with copy paste, and it's very evident. And like how do you figure out like how far can you go and tweak these things, right? And so like there will be probably some fixes and tweaks that will probably be acceptable by many players and some which are not, right? But you need to figure out like what these are and give the players the opportunity to experience attempts to fix certain things, right? Otherwise you're just stuck with whatever is the status quo, right? You don't take steps forward to explore potentially better outcomes, right? You just like stick with what is there. Like, for example, you can stick with a retail game, and never explore anything that goes beyond that. You could claim it's the best game ever, yeah, the original game as released by EA, and just stick with that and leave it at that. Or you can go ahead and fix all the technical issues, but also fix gameplay issues, right? But then this causes all this controversy. And the problem with that is that developers are well aware of the controversial nature of these things, right? That's why in our projects, we label anything that is controversial as controversial. And now with the source code in place, we can actually, tackle controversial things and make them configurable in ways, right? So we say, okay, mods can decide on their own if they want to opt in that kind of fix or that kind of change or not, right? But the problem is it's difficult from a social perspective, not necessarily from a technical perspective, but a social perspective, because players will use developers that want to go into discovery and want to improve the game. They will use this as a reason to attack these developers, right? And I think that's a problem, because it annihilates the developers, and it slows down development in ways, and it stifles innovation, I would say. And also it's bad because it carries a risk of fracturing the community if the community cannot come together and make a consensus. But if you just have like loud voices that overshadow everything and that attack the developers, then these kind of rule the narrative of how things will go, right? So if you have like some players who spam Discord servers or spam forums, or just put their word out there that they are not happy with this and badmouth people, or insult them, or make up stories or fake story, whatever, right? They just put something out there to make developers look unfavorable, and that then that mobilizes another group to chime in and maybe support the loud voices, maybe work against the loud voices. But it creates like a rift in the community. Like the community is not coming together to explore and figure it out together, but the community is trying to push agendas. Like individuals try to push agendas, right? And I think that's a wrong approach. I think the community should come together, and I think that people from all sorts of areas need to have some say. Like, so if we look at community down here, right? So obviously the community is not just 4 guys, right? So like you can have community which is like huge, right? Super big community, and it's like a lot of people in here, yeah, groups and people. And they all, I just drew 2 here, but, like imagine there's like a lot of people in here, they all come together and they all like to play the 0 hour, right? And I think in the end, like all these players, they should have a say. It should not be that you have like, like a tiny group here and have like a couple guys in here, and then it's just these guys that talk to the developers, and they say what can be worked on and what cannot be worked on. I don't think that this is the way to go, because what this does is that these guys here, they will speak for the whole circle. The green guys here will speak for the red circle, right? Because the developers now will have to listen to these guys here, right? And then what happens if someone here from the big circle is talking, then eventually these loud voices, they will annihilate these smaller voices from the big pool of players, right? And because what these people can do is they can try to leverage like the status as like a good player, for example, right? Can use their status or far reach or a big community. Like let's say someone has a big Discord server, right? And they are the owner of the Discord server, and then they can push an agenda in there, right? And what this does is that basically these few people control the whole narrative, right? The equivalent of this is what we see in like our democracies, right? if you have like so this is a population of like a country or a state, right? And they vote for their representatives, but then you have these special interest groups from companies, right? Like, like lobbyists, like some big companies, motor companies or oil companies, chemical companies, right? They will talk to the governments directly so that the governments implement certain regulations, right? And then, the big circle here, the big crowd, doesn't really get much of a say in what the loud voices whisper or yell here to developers, right? So they drive the narrative. And if these guys don't follow suit with this narrative, then these lobbyists will find ways to make the life harder for developers or for publishers, right? So it's like an interest group that wants to push their agenda into a certain direction. I personally don't think that this is a good way. I think this should not be done. I think in the end, the community as a whole will decide what works and what doesn't work, what is good, what plays good, what makes the game better, right? So I think developers will be very good at like offering solutions and figuring out good implementations for certain things, right? And then in the end, players will have to see whether they like it or not, right? And that does not just refer to the small interest group, but the whole community, all the players, right? And I know that there are some players who rightfully or wrongfully think that certain people need to have more voice in this. But then this is this dilemma, like it's not a real democracy then, right? And somehow the new players or semi-players, they have less in a say of how the game is shaped than some pro player. Why? Like, why is a pro player more important to consider to shape the game than other players? Like, in the end, everyone equally has the right to have fun in the game, right? So new players should get the best deal. Semi-players should get the best deal. Pro players should get the best deal. Any player should get a good deal. But of course, there have to be compromises. Like, it's not possible to make everyone happy, right? There will be changes that someone is maybe not that fond of, but I think in the end, the volume of improvements will be so vast that I think there will be something for everyone in the end, right? And it's just a matter that we find good solutions when identifying tangible issues that we think need looking at, right? So, for example, a popular example is the Aurora bomber, right? Aurora bomber in noob games, the Aurora bomber is not particularly welcome, right? In pro games, the Aurora is perfectly fine. It's not overpowered. Alpha Aurora is strong, but Super Weapon General is not particularly a beast in team and in one-on-one games at all times. So, pro players can deal with this, but new players, they might think, oof, this Aurora is just entering my base all the time. It cannot be shut down. I don't like this, right? And I'm frustrated by this because I can't shoot it down. I have these 1,000 laser defenses here, and the Aurora just flies through it, right? So that's not nice, right? So and then, like, how do you deal with this now? Do you just listen to the pro players who say, yeah, the Aurora is perfectly fine, don't touch it, never touch it? But then, the new players will then have to deal with it, and they just can never really, they will then need to rely on the social contract, like no Aurora, no demo bikes, no super weapon, right? It's like the social contract of making up match rules. But it would be much better if the game caters to specific problems that players have, and not just like pro players, but all the players. And this is something that I'm a bit worried that there is right now no solution to this problem. I don't see it. As soon as developers think about certain things or discover certain things or want to discuss certain aspects that are controversial, and everyone acknowledges that these things are controversial, then they will start the shaming campaigns and bad mouthing and insulting and trolling, making sarcastic posts, and basically they want the goal with this language is to delegitimize the point that someone else is bringing up, so they can delegitimize the perspective of semi and new players, but also of developers. And for this, they use their status as a better player, right? So if a player is very good, he can click fast and he has good strategies and he wins a lot of matches, then that player is perceived as being knowledgeable and a good designer and someone who has the authority to shape how the game should function, and someone has to to decide whether this thing is good or this thing is bad, right? And the problem is that they don't necessarily communicate the vast experiences they have into tangible action items, but they will just use that excuse to just shame someone for looking into something, and then they will say okay, yeah, you're just a semi player at best. How do you know what needs to be done here, right? So I mean, the equivalent is let's say you have a designer at the game studio at EA. EA employs a game designer. He joins 0 hour development team after 25 years, and starts designing and making tweaks. And of course, he won't be a super pro player, right? He might be decent and make some rush here and there, but he won't be necessarily be an amazing player who wins tournaments left and right? And so how do you deal with this now from a pro player perspective? Do you legitimize the EA designer because he's not an excellent player? You say, okay, yeah, you can't really make the good designs, and what do you do then? EA pushes a change, you're not happy with it, and you harass EA, or what do you do? I don't think it's a good strategy. I think the better strategy for the community as a whole, and to building towards a product that is good for the vast majority of players who are not focusing on the mods, right? I think the best strategy is to come together and think about strategies to tackle problems when they are identified, no matter how ridiculous they might seem. If someone brings something up, then that means there is something up to it. Of course, there can be there can be a lot of proposals that are not suitable to implement, right? But then, you just investigate, and maybe you don't think it's good, and maybe everyone agrees, and then you just move to the next thing, done, right? But there can be things that the majority of players thinks that, let's look into this. We identify this is a problem. Can we find a solution? Okay, solution A, that doesn't seem so nice. Maybe solution B, also not so nice. Solution C, let's try this and give it a go. Maybe in a in a test group, or maybe you can roll it out as a temporary change for a month, right? To just have everyone play and see if they like it or not. And you can have a tooling that allows players to vote on certain things, right? To give their feedbacks, to thumbs up or thumbs down certain aspects, right? So try to figure out how these things can be shaped in ways that we don't rely on the loud voices to dictate how things should be tackled. but try to come up with a system where where everyone is allowed to propose some change, no matter how ridiculous it might seem to someone. And if someone disagrees, then you just say, yeah, I disagree with that because XYZ. You give an explanation. You say, yeah, it's not a good idea because it has these knock-on effects, or it's not necessary because it's already good enough, or it's already pretty bad. Let's not make it worse than before because that unit is not so good to begin with. You can explain if something is not the right course of action, right? So there's always a way to find a solution, and if there's no solution, well, then you just keep what you currently have, but maybe down the line you figure something out. And I think it's better to be open-minded and have like a healthy discourse about what can be done and what cannot be done, and not go into the realms of the shame speech and the insults and the sarcasm and the disrespect. It's not good. I don't agree with this narrative, and unfortunately this is still the case. It has not been solved, and it's not a super big issue, but it's a big enough issue to recognize that it is an issue. And I think that's the only social issue that we have in this whole construct. Other than this, I don't see any problems right now. Luckily, we don't have any technical issues anymore. Like just 6 months ago, before EA released the source code, we had this huge problem with the Time project, which was a reverse engineer effort for 0 Hour, which was super slow and super difficult, and there was such a big headache, a big problem, and that is solved. So from technical perspective, we can tackle everything now, and I think this is reason to be absolutely happy about how things are currently. And I also like how the developers are currently working on things. Like the things exactly work the way that I would expect them to work from development side. Like we have people working here in the Superhackers repository on code. Then we have the online guys working on the server and the new client that connects to the server, and the modding guys who already explore like changes that make the mods better and fix a lot of issues, right? So like from a technical standpoint, like things work at the way they should, and it's great. It's really good to see. I really appreciate all the other developers that put in the time to fix and improve the game. And I think 0 Hour will have its best days ahead. I'm convinced, because technically there's nothing that stops us from making it an amazing experience. And the interesting thing is that the game itself is in such a bad state originally, but still players love it so much, despite all the technical issues with crashes and mismatches and lags and disconnects and all these things. Players still like the game, which is obviously great, and it's also the reason why developers like to work on these things, because the developers also love the game, right? But yeah, the social problem, this has not been fixed or not addressed. I see there are some efforts to address this, but I don't know how they want to solve it, because it's deeply rooted into fears and misconceptions and low trust. Like people don't have trust, and I think this is also one of the reasons why we at Superhackers we work towards trying to decentralize aspects of how things are published. Like with I think this has not been talked much about yet, but with the introduction of the GenHub tool, we want to encourage the decentralized nature of publishers being empowered to publish their game contents to all the players on their own, with their own content catalogs, and this will allow that the community can self-regulate what they build, right? So it means that there's no central authority that can push content to all the players, but the players will have the opportunity to opt into whatever is the best product, right, at any given time. And this has been a big problem in the past, with GenTool, for example. One of the problems with GenTool is that it pushed content like the maps, for example, the ranked maps, and no one could take ownership over this, right? Other than the original author. The same with GenPatcher. Like only the original author of GenPatcher can issue the content that is on there, right? And I think this is a problem because it means that some people will have like a monopoly over content that is pushed to the players. And this is not the way that we aim to do it. Like we want to have it as decentralized as we can make it, to empower all the mods and the multiplayer community to self-regulate and push the best content and gravitate towards that. Yeah. So I see that it's also still a big misconception that somehow people think that Superhackers is like pushing agenda or so, but that's actually not the case, especially after we merged with Community Outpost. The route is that Superhackers is building tech tools, game clients to enable publishers to release the content that they like to release, so that Community Outpost can release a community patch with all the designs and all the best choices that they think is best, right? So Superhackers will build the technical foundation, but then Community Outpost can say, okay, we want this or we want that, and maybe we build something that Community Outpost does not want to release, right? Or maybe they want to postpone it or skip it, right? But maybe some other publisher, like some mod or someone else wants to publish what we have prepared here, but not necessarily Community Outpost, right? So it gives the ability to build up things that different communities can benefit from, but we don't really dictate like what will be the end products, right? It could be different to what we think it could be, but obviously I think developers obviously will also have interest, right? And they would probably make suggestions as to if we do this, there could be these problems, or this could be weird, right? So there probably will be this, but in the end, the publishers will decide what they want to push out to the player base, right? Yeah. And so right now, what we see is Generals Online is already pushing content to the players. So they build on top of the Superhackers code. So basically, Generals Online right now is already our first publisher, because Community Outpost is not publishing anything right now, and Superhackers is also not publishing anything on their own. So yeah, we are not publishing anything right now. It's only Generals Online that is publishing. I don't know about the modding, if they're already publishing or just building up as well. But yeah, from our side, we are building up right now because there's still a lot of stuff to do to have like a convincing first release. And yeah, but it's fine. The way this works is fine. Generals Online publishes their clients, and that's perfectly fine, right? Now, obviously, it gives them a bit of a good first impression, because everyone will look at Generals Online and say, "Wow, it's so amazing," and and will be hyped for Generals Online specifically because they see that they make all these amazing things. So they take a bit of thunder from Community Outpost at that same time, because then if Community Outpost releases the client that we currently built for Community Outpost to release, then the changes that are already inherited by Generals Online won't be as new anymore, right? Because some players will already have seen the benefits in this game client, but that's just the nature of how this is, right? It's fine, right? Yeah, and then in the end, the players will have to decide like what they like, what kind of clients. Obviously, Community Outpost does have the ambition to release the game client that most multiplayer players would then like to play. But it could be that maybe Community Outpost won't be that publisher, right? If maybe they make the wrong decisions. Hopefully not, but it could be, and maybe there would be another product emerging, right? Some other, like let's say Game Replays releases their own game clients, Game Replays. That's a website, right? And maybe they release a game client, and then all the players would play that thing, right? It could be, right? Then obviously it would mean that Community Outpost made some mistakes along the way. But I think technically we probably should also build the things in ways that there's still overlap. Like let's say you have many players who like this and many players who like this, that you still have an overlap here, that the players can still discover each other, and that they can play this easily or play this easily if there is a situation that you have like multiple emerging projects that go into different directions. But obviously ideally there would be like one project that caters towards everyone and tries to have something for everyone, for all the noobs, all the semis, and all the pros, and make everyone happy in ways, right? That obviously is the best goal, but of course it can happen that there will be different clients. But yeah, I think we will figure it out, and I think it just requires the community to be open-minded and to communicate, and I don't know, somehow they need to solve this problem of communication. I don't know how they can do it because it's hard to do. It's very hard to do. But there must be a solution. Like obviously one solution would be if EA would just work on this thing, right? If EA would work, then they are the absolute authority. They push it on Steam, right? And no matter what EA does, every player has to suck it up, right? So, essentially, right? Because EA will be the ultimate authority. But if we have like a community-driven authority, then we have to self-regulate. And the only way to do that is to communicate, to be open-minded, to explore, and to have a genuine interest that all the projects are successful and work together. Yeah. That no one is working against each other, that there's no bad blood and no frustrations, and everyone is in good spirits. And if there are disagreements, then you try to solve it and try to find a solution that makes the majority happy. And you don't do this by shouting or screaming or being outraged. You just communicate in a happy spirit. Yeah. And I think if players and developers can do this, then I think this will be just fine. Yeah. So I hope that that someone can figure this out. It's not easy because it's like there's just so many communities and many interest groups as well, right? So yeah, somehow you somehow need to make this democracy work. I think a big part of this is the tooling, right? Like, so for example, in Steam, right, you have the ability to leave reviews on products. And so like this gives a direct feedback to developers. Like if a Steam game is poorly rated, it's clearly an indicator to the game developer that they need to course correct. And if we have this to give the community the power to, you know, to give feedbacks in an easy way and in a transparent way and in a safe way, then I think this would be great to have products emerge that are high quality and that cater to what the community wants, and that the majority of players will be happy. And I think this is the best case scenario, that everyone is happy. And I think it's important that the developers, they will need the players, because if they don't have players, they have no useful product. But the players, they also need the developers, because no developers means no development, right? And yeah, and there will be other challenges, despite, you know, this communication issue, the social issue. There will be other challenges, and that will require the community to come together, and that is cheating. It will be a very big issue, cheating, because of the open source nature of the game title. And developers, players will need the developers to take care of this. And I think players are well advised to look forward to what the developers can produce. And obviously the developers, they will be happy if they can make the fair players happy, you know, and give them a good experience, right? And at the end of the day, I think what is most important is to make a great game, to make 0 Hour a fantastic game, because that's what the game deserves, right? Which goes even beyond all the individual players. Make it the best game, yeah, for millions of players, right? So if you think big, yeah, and let's be free here and think big, and let's not just say that 0 Hour is here for this group of players that you have seen the last couple of years, but maybe you also want to bring in more players, have, you know, make the game so good that, you know, it rivals the Counter-Strike, you know, and and all the big titles, the Call of Duty and so on, yeah. Best strategy game. So yeah, you want to plan big, and for this, I think you need to have an open mind, and you need to be willing to compromise and explore. Yeah, because I don't think it will be possible to make everyone happy, and I think everyone needs to understand this. I'm pretty sure that I won't be happy about things. I know that I haven't been with some decisions, but in the end, these will be so minuscule in the grand picture of things, because these controversial topics, and we're mainly talking about controversial things here, and these take a very tiny portion of the actual work that needs to be done, right? So the vast majority amount of things that will be improved and fixed, they are not controversial. It's just a really tiny portion, right? And it's something that is not super important, but there are some things that need consideration at some point. Not now. Right now, we don't do, at least in our organization here in Superhackers, we don't do any controversial or gameplay changes. Actually, our game client is compatible with the retail game client. The modding guys, they do controversial changes, obviously, but that's fine, because they work towards like mods that are controversial in nature or not controversial. I don't know if they have that distinction even. But yeah, I don't know if people are on the same page here as I am. I can only say that from developer perspective, I'm very happy with how the things are developing. It's super great, and I'm super happy that all the technical issues are no longer a concern. Like the whole time situation, I call it, from the assembly armada, the reverse engineering project. It was such a headache. Really, it was super. It was frustrating for me because I just wanted to fix the game, But first, you have to build up the game by reverse engineering. It was bonkers, and So from development side, it's fantastic, and I think we just need to solve this. And if we solve this, then the next problem will be the cheating, and obviously the cheating. This will be probably even be the tougher problem than the social problem here. And cheating is hard because of the open sourceness of the code, right? Everyone will be able to create amazing cheats, basically, with the open source client. And so we need to develop strategies, implementations that make the client more resilient towards cheating in the network. So that would be hard, but we can probably figure out ways to at least make it more difficult, or I don't know. It's something. It's probably also cheating is probably also a social issue because, like, you can regulate. Like the community can also weed out cheaters, right? By like preventing them access from their matches, right? And maybe have like a convicted cheater registry somewhere, right? That is publicly available. Maybe the cheater gets like an icon behind his name on the online server, right? This is a cheater. Beware. We don't ban him, but we mark him as a cheater. That would be actually funny. Then the cheaters can play with themselves, I think that would also be fine. I don't think it would be necessary to ban cheaters per se, right? You just mark them as cheaters and you just let them play against other cheaters. For example, the Twilight Flame community, I think they are pretty okay with map hacks, right? So you might as well just let them play in the Twilight Flame map hack game, right? So not a big deal if it's just cheaters or players who don't take issues playing against cheaters. I think that can also be a thing, right? Who like the challenge of a harder opponent with cheats. Right? It could be. These are my thoughts on this. I suspect that players will disagree with what I say. Others will maybe agree. I don't know. I mean, I'm just one guy. I mostly want to focus on development. I know that I cannot solve the social issue, and I also don't want to. I really don't want to because it's so much work, and it's not my specialty. I want to develop, and that's it. So if someone can fix the social contracts in the community towards the developers, I think that would be great. Is it possible? Maybe. Will it happen short term? Likely not. I suspect that developers first need to build some trust, likely, and then if players enjoy the product and and they see that they can have some say, then and see that it moves into an overall good direction that they like, then that's probably the best sign for players to be relaxed. But if things don't turn out the players like, then they always have the choice to just go to whatever project they think is the best for them, right? So if they don't like what Community Outpost publishes, then they can use what Game Replays publishes or what Generals Online publishes. So it's up to the players in the end. But obviously it would be good if all players are more or less aligned of where to go to, right? So I know I talked here with X64, which is the developer lead of Generals Online, and the plan in the medium, not short term, but medium to long term is that the Generals Online client that connects the game to the server of Generals Online will be integrated into the Superhackers, into this project, and then all the projects that inherit from the Superhackers, like the modding project here, or here community outpost, or maybe the game replays publishing, they will then also all inherit Generals Online, right? So it's like everyone will then be able to use Generals Online to connect to the backends using this. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that that from this side that Generals Online would only ever be the only server solution. Like let's say which right now is not what I see happening, but let's say the Generals Online server would not be good enough, or had bad governance, or would be abandoned, or things like this, and someone else could emerge and could build another new server, and they could build up that, and maybe that would be amazing as well, right? And so let's say you have here another bubble, and that would be online 2, yeah, online 2, and then that can also go in here, and then the game code would be able to connect players to this server or the online 2 server, right? So it would give the flexibility that publishers can then say, okay, we want to use an online 2 server now, because the online 1 is not the best anymore, right? So the plan is also that Generals Online will open source their server code, which also means that other developers could fork Generals Online, right, and make a new version of Generals Online, right? And then that could go back into the Superhackers as another version of the original online experience, right? Like things can evolve and can develop. Now, obviously, Superhackers could also be forked by some other superhackers, yeah, and be totally changed in these ways, right? So it doesn't have to be that our repository will be the center of things, right? It could be that other projects emerge, maybe even Generals Online will be the center cornerstone, right? That could also be you don't know what happens. It all depends, it depends on where the developers will put their work towards. That's it. Right? If this project was abandoned, then other projects would emerge, right? And then the publishers here and the rectangles, they would need to figure out then which pieces to pick to make their version publishings, right? But obviously from my side, I'm very engaged here, so I will keep driving this progress. And right now I don't see myself going anywhere else, so I will just keep building. And I will just keep building and make the game better. That's it. And there are also many other developers here, and here in Generals Online, and here in the modding. So things will build up and evolve. And I think in the end, the game will just become better, right? And I think that's all that matters. That the game becomes better, and that players enjoy ever evolving game experience. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I've talked enough about this. Yeah. So there's a social issue in the grand scheme of things. I'm not so worried about it, but it would be nice if this could be solved. Potentially, it will solve itself. But yeah, I don't know. It's a hard issue. Yeah. Anyway, I will keep building. I will end this session now here, and it has been almost 1 hour. Yeah, I will end the session here and continue with some programming in the next video. Yeah. I wish you a great day or night until next time. Goodbye.